Okay, so thank you, Don, for taking the time to talk to us. Very excited to have you here. I'm going to read a quick profile on you, Don, and then I'm going to hand it over to you and ask a few questions. So,
Sounds great.
Great. So thank you, Don. Don Stanley is our guest today. She earned her bachelor's from University of Alabama here in Huntsville with a major in chemical engineering and minor in biological sciences. Mrs. Stanley is currently the Deputy Director of Cross-Program Strategic Integration for the Exploration Systems Directorate at NASA headquarters. In this capacity, she collaborates with the Space Launch Systems, Orion Crew Module, and Exploration Ground Systems as the agency develops, manufactures, tests, and launches the next generation rocket. Through her NASA career, Mrs. Stanley has supported various programs and projects and initiatives, including Ares 1 through 10, Space Shuttle, International Space Station, X-33, Chandra, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and numerous payloads. Mrs. Stanley has received several honors, including the NASA Exceptional Service Medal, NASA Exceptional Achievement Medal, and the Silver Snoopy Award. Mrs. Stanley is involved in various community organizations, including Girls Incorporated, Burritt Mountain, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, and the Jack and Jill of America. She serves as the board of directors of the Redstone Federal Credit Union and is the board chair for the Burritt Museum Board of Directors. She is a graduate of the Leadership Huntsville, Madison County, and Leadership, Alabama. Working with youth has been the calling to Mrs. Stanley, who has been working with youth for 20 years since she was first served as the Christian Educated Director and Youth Director at Liberty Presbyterian Church. She has organized programs for middle and high school students, including award-winning Emerging Youth Leadership Program and Ascend, respectively. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics were keys for these programs, which included collaboration with Hudson Alpha, NASA, Alabama A&M University, and the Sylvian Learning Center, to name a few. She leads the Girls of the Month program, a long-established partnership between her sorority and Girls Incorporated, at which elementary, middle school girls are recognized for being helpful, sharing, and caring. She has organized girls' summits with Girls Incorporated, and she has supported Girl Scouts in Reading is Fundamental, serving as a school coordinator at Montview Elementary School. On Sundays, you can find her teaching Sunday school to students who are in grades 1 through 3 at Progressive Union Missionary Baptist Church. Mrs. Stanley is married to Thornton Stanley Jr., and they are the proud parents of 3 children, Thornton Stanley III, Drew Stanley, and Hannah Stanley. Mrs. Stanley, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So obviously an astounding amount of achievements and wonderful awards there. Anything in particular that you want to really dive into and give us some history or some information on?
Sure. You know, one of the awards that I'm most proud of having received is the Silver Snoopy Award. And that award, of course, is Snoopy from Peanuts cartoon. There was a partnership that NASA established many years ago as a way to connect with the public, as well as to honor our employees who focus on safety. And of course, we want safety for astronauts, safety for property, and safety for our hardware and our rockets. And so that was an award I received probably about 20 years ago at NASA when I worked in the Materials and Processes Laboratory. And I supported the Space Shuttle program, also International Space Station, a lot of different payload programs. And I conducted a lot of investigations, trying to help them understand what we could do better when we face challenges so that we could be safe. And so that Silver Snoopy is real important because we're all about safety and especially safety of our crew. So I was real honored to receive that award from the agency.
That is wonderful. What a fun story. It's a unique achievement, to say the least. I've not met anybody else with that kind of award.
Cool.
Okay, so you're here to talk to us a little bit about the SLS program, the Space Launch Systems program, and particularly Ares, the program set as a whole. So what can you tell us about Ares? What's the mission? What's the end goal? Those kind of things.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the Artemis program. And so we're really excited about NASA, about the Artemis program. So it is the first step in the next era of human exploration. And so together with commercial and international partners, we at NASA are trying to establish a sustainable presence on the moon to prepare for future missions to Mars. And so that is what I'm most excited about, is going to Mars. And so the things we're doing now are preparing the agency and our country to go to Mars. And so with the Artemis program, what we're doing at NASA is that we're going to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. So I'm excited about having the first female astronaut to be able to land on the moon in 2024. That is just historic, and I'm just proud to be a part of the agency and a part of the program that will be able to say that and be a part of history. And so to achieve that, we're using innovative technologies to explore more of the lunar surface than we ever did before. And so we will use what we learn on the moon and around the moon to take a giant leap by sending astronauts to Mars. And so everything is a step, and so that we'll be prepared, we'll make sure we're taking the appropriate risk so that we'll be safe for our astronauts.
I'm getting goosebumps. I mean, the concept of being able to send the next man, and most importantly, the first woman to the moon, and then eventually the Mars is a pipe dream for me. So it's wonderful to hear it's actually taking strong steps. And thanks for the clarification on the Artemis. I clearly have Aries on the mind with the last with the introduction. So you say you're working with industry and international partners. So NASA isn't going this alone, right?
No.
Okay.
And so, one of the things that we definitely pride ourselves on are partnerships. We know we can't do it alone, and we don't want to do it alone, right? We want to have innovative technologies. We want to involve industry partners as well as international partners in what we're doing. And so one of the things that, SLS is proud to say is that, we have contractors and support services from all across this country. Look in pretty much every state, there's somebody that's supporting the Space Launch System and supporting the Artemis program. And we're really proud of that this is a national endeavor, that we are supporting industry across the country, and they're providing those unique capabilities and hardware and services that are going to get us to the moon and beyond. And so while NASA, we're leading the Artemis program, one of the things we're doing, though, is that we do have these industry and international partners, and they play a key role, in helping us achieve this sustainable and robust presence on the moon. And so while we're doing that, we're developing requirements, and then we work back with our industry partners as well as our international partners to develop hardware and software that we'll need to go back to the moon and on to Mars. And so it's important that we have this international cooperation, right, on and around the moon as a part of this Artemis program. And so we've established what we call the Artemis Accords. So it's a practical set of principles, it kind of serves as a guide for space exploration among the different nations of the world. Now, everybody's not a part of this Accords, but there are a few nations that have joined us thus far, including Australia, Brazil, Canada. We have Italy a part of it. United Kingdom is a part of it as well. And so a few other countries are a part: Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, and of course, United States of America. And so we're a part of this accord where we're agreeing to partner and to work together towards having a safe space program going to the moon and beyond.
Wow.
Because we know we can't do it alone.
Right. So it's not a race for the United States. It is a race for the world, that we're all in it together. And I can say, I'm a part of the development side of the house, and I am working with a lot of my peers and a lot of primes. And I can say, sitting in those meetings with dozens of different industry partners and NASA on the call, and not just NASA, Marshall Flight Center, we've got Goddard, we have a lot of different NASA entities involved in this. It is wonderful seeing the collaboration rather than the single focused direction and saying you will meet these requirements. It's everybody's collaborating and working together and doing puts and takes, which is wonderful to see.
I agree that, because it really takes all of us to get us there. And so it's really great that we have the partnerships in place within the agency and external to the agency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about what are the aspects that are actually going to get us to the moon and to Mars, right? And we're not going to launch a rocket from Earth and then go straight to Mars, right? That's just not feasible. So what are the major components that are in that mission?
Well, great. It's a great question. So, as we're developing and building this capability, right, to go back to the moon and then eventually to Mars and beyond, I like to say and beyond as well. There's several things that we're doing right now to build and ensure that success. And so, of course, one of the great things we're doing here in Huntsville is that we're designing and building the most powerful rocket in the world ever. And so our new powerful rocket will send humans and cargo to the moon and beyond, and that's called the Space Launch System, which you support. And it's designed to be flexible and evolvable. And I think that's one of the things when we were first laying out the design is that we wanted to be able to achieve the various missions that our stakeholders would ask NASA to do. And so this Space Launch System has met that request, and that we're flexible and evolvable so that we can go back to deep space like Saturn V, which took, astronauts and humans to the moon in the 1960s and 70s. And so this rocket will allow us to take payloads, take astronauts to the moon and Mars, and basically do it in less trips that will be required. And so that's why we're trying to build a powerful rocket so that we can do it in less trips, so we can get people there safely and have all the things, supplies and materials that they need to be sustainable on the moon and Mars. And then, of course, another thing that we're doing is that we are building a spacecraft for lunar missions. And so what does that mean? That's our Orion spacecraft that's being developed with our Johnson Space Center. And this particular vehicle will carry the crew, the astronauts, to lunar orbit. And so they have a very important role. And so they'll take them to lunar orbit and return them safely to Earth. And so that's always key for us, a safe return for our astronauts. And so Orion has been built to withstand the extreme heat that they will experience during re-entry into the atmosphere. And so our co-workers at JSC is designing that. And then, of course, we think we can't launch the rocket without it being put together and then launched from a site. And so that means we're working with our co-workers at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And so they integrate and stack the different pieces of the rocket or the Space Launch System, as well as their Orion spacecraft. And then they load the propellants, the fuels that we need for our engines. And then they load that, and then they launch the rocket from Kennedy Space Center. And then, of course, as we look to future missions, I'll talk a little later about some of our earlier Artemis missions. We are looking at working with a program called Gateway that's out of Johnson Space Center, and they're looking to build an outpost around the moon to support human and scientific exploration in deep space. And of course, this again is built with partnerships with commercial and international partners, because we have the European Space Agency that's playing an important role in providing hardware for that program as well. And then we look at human landing systems, right? So once the astronauts get there, they have to have something to get around on, right? We see those images of the astronauts on the moon, and we think about the different rovers and things that they utilize. Well, NASA is partnering with American companies to land astronauts safely on the lunar surface again. And so these systems will dock with the Orion and the Gateway in a lunar orbit. So they'll be around the moon, and then they will take the crew safely to the surface of the moon, and then as well as return them back to orbit. So once again, it's all about safety, getting them back to the moon so they can do more exploration on the moon, go to greater areas on the surface of the moon, go to places that we've never been on the moon as well. So we're excited about that. And then lastly, one of the things we're having to do is develop modern spacesuits. I think I have in my images those spacesuits from the 60s and 70s that astronauts wore. And so they need new spacesuits, right, to explore the harsh environments of space. As they go back to the moon, which is so far away from the Earth, and then, of course, Mars, they need to have spacesuits that are going to allow them to withstand and survive in those harsh environments. And so we're working on advanced exploration, extravehicular mobility unit, and that's going to support lunar surface expeditions. And so during launch and reentry, our astronauts will wear their Orion crew survival system suits. And I'm sure since you've been here, at NASA, we love acronyms. So I'm going to try to stay away from acronyms, because all these things, we have a bunch of acronyms on: OCSS, XEMU, SLS, MPCV. So I'm going to stay away from those and try to say it out so that we'll all know what we're talking about. So they got to have new spacesuits. As our attire has changed over the years, so does the spacesuits that the astronauts need. And so they're developing those now as well to make sure. And so all of those different components are all a part of the Artemis program that's going to take us back to the moon and then eventually to Mars.
Yeah, you bring up the point about the spacesuit, which actually hasn't popped in my mind. There's been so much advance in technologies, and even in the textile industry, with different types of abrasive resistant type of materials since last time we were on the moon. That is incredible. So, so obviously there's a lot of moving parts here. And one thing I want to touch on, we've got multiple tests going on, right? We've got the green runs going down at Stennis, where we're testing the engines at full power, which is really exciting. I know they've got their second test coming up here at the end of February. But even whenever that test is completed, it's not like we can just ship those engines to Kennedy and then we're going to launch the next month, right? There's a lot more moving parts. I think we're building up the core stage. I thought I saw a video of them testing the crawler down at Kennedy that takes hours and hours to go from its primary spot to the launch spot. So there's a lot of moving parts there.
It is. It definitely is, you know, and one of the things that I say we're really good at NASA is working with each other. And so, of course, that means Space Launch System, the Orion crew capsule, and the exploration ground systems down at Kennedy Space Center. They all have to work together. They have to develop schedules that allow them to understand when the hardware and software are going to get there, so that they'll be ready to process the hardware and integrate and stack and test the hardware at the Cape. And so there's lots of meetings, integration meetings, scheduled meetings that occur so that Kennedy Space Center understands what the requirements of the vehicle and the rockets are, so that when they get those parts, that they'll be able to integrate them appropriately, they'll be able to test them appropriately, then of course load the actual fuel when we get ready to test the hardware. So it definitely takes a lot of integration, and we have really great people who are good at understanding the very minute details of what it takes to get it done, so that we have good schedules in place, so that we understand every step that we're needing and how long it'll take to execute those steps as well. And so we're really pleased with the team members that we have across the programs and across Exploration Systems Directorate.
I've been very impressed to date working with that team, so it's great. Okay, so we've got this great mission. We have all this technology. We're obviously working to a tight schedule of some sort to meet the first launch. So what does the timeline look for the entire program?
Okay, so I'll talk about our first three missions in particular today. And so Artemis 1, which is the one now that you talk about, the Green Run hot fire, that's scheduled to occur next week. That is for Artemis 1. And so that's scheduled to launch later this year. So we are so excited about taking this next step in history. So it's going to be an uncrewed Orion, so no astronauts on this mission. It's going to go into Earth orbit. And so it's going to place it toward a lunar distant retrograde orbit, where it's going to travel 40,000 miles beyond the moon, or a total of 280,000 miles from Earth before returning back home. And so, of course, this is a mission is to make sure we're going to be prepared for Artemis 2 mission, which is currently scheduled for 2023. And it's going to be our first crewed flight. So we're going to have astronauts on the Space Launch System and in the Orion capsule. And then we're going to send 4 astronauts to the lunar environment for the first time in more than 50 years. And so this will be what we call the Artemis Generations Apollo 8 moment. So we're just really excited about this, the historic nature of what we're doing. And so we're like, hey, this is our Apollo 8 moment. And this is when the astronauts will aboard Orion, will capture the full globe of the Earth from afar as a backdrop to the moon. So we think about all those images from the Apollo program of the astronauts looking back at Earth with the moon in the background and the backdrop behind them. And so this is going to be our moment for our astronauts and for our generation. So I'm just excited about Artemis 2, and it's getting astronauts back in space and back to the moon. And then Artemis 3 is planned for 2024. And so Artemis 3 will be the culmination of the rigorous testing and more than 2 million miles accumulated in space. That's a lot of miles on NASA's Deep Space Transportation System, that we're going to use the same design. We call it Block 1 for Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 and Artemis 3. And so we're going to build upon the lessons we learned in testing, but also in flight for Artemis 3. And so Ryan and his crew of 4 will once again travel to the moon. This time they're going to make history with the first man and the first woman and the next man actually walking on the surface again. And so we're really excited about these first 3 missions. Now, of course, the Artemis mission goes on beyond when we go back and have other upgrades, and we actually go to Mars and do other activities. But these are our first 3 that we're working very hard to achieve and meet those upcoming schedules as noted.
Wow. And so it sounds like the first launch is coming up soon. We've worked
Yes.
Quite a long time to get here. And then once that launch hits, it's a launch and then another launch and then another launch. It's pretty soon. Wow.
It is. And that's exciting, right? So we want to get back into our regular launches. And then of course, for what we're doing internal at NASA, we have partnerships with other programs in the agency, right, where they support taking supplies and astronauts back up to the International Space Station. But what we're doing in this particular program and in this directorate, we're going to the moon and to far space and deep space and to Mars. And so we need a big, heavy rocket to kind of do the riskier things and to meet those challenges, to learn more about Earth and about ourselves. So that's really exciting. So I really love the science that we'll be able to do because we have a rocket like this.
Yeah, and we break that entry, and suddenly we can test a lot more than what we could have ever tested before, which is exciting. So obviously, it's exciting times for us, right? We're in the industry.
Yeah.
Any advice or any place that you would point students and the future of the industry? I mean, that's who we're talking to right now. Anywhere that you would point them to either get more involved or to monitor the progress or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, definitely, NASA, one of the things that I say NASA does well, we do a lot of things well, but we are really good with engaging the public and especially students. And so there are a number of sites, and I'll mention some of the programs and some of the sites where your students can get information on about NASA. We have a NASA STEM engagement activity where we have a website, right? Everybody has a website now, right? And so it's a way for students to join the Artemis generation. And so you can find activities, posters, videos, and all kinds of information on the Artemis program. And of course, you just go to www.nasa.gov/join Artemis. And then Space Launch System itself also has a web page full of, again, activities, videos, posters, recorded presentations. You can get a little more detail on the different components of the rocket, why we do what we do. You can learn more from some of our really great young and established engineers. And same thing, www.nasa.gov/ this time it's SLS Outreach. And then also what I really love is that we have several Artemis student challenges that you can get to at stem.nasa.gov/Artemis. And some of the initiatives include student launch, where you actually build a rocket with a payload. And you come here, and it's actually in Huntsville where we have a competition, and you launch the rocket. And so that program has been going on for a number of years now. And another one of my favorite events that we have is the NASA Human Exploration Rover Challenge. And that's where you're building a rover, right, for the moon or for Mars. And so then you come typically to our Space and Rocket Center that's located in Huntsville. And then they have developed a terrain that's similar to the moon in the past. And then you take your rover you developed and you go over this track, this obstacle course, and then they award prizes based on best design, who has a sturdy design, different aspects of your design are being awarded. So there's a lot of opportunities for recognition, but those are 2 long-standing programs that the agency has had that really get students, middle school, high school, and college students engaged in getting hands-on experience with developing rockets, developing payloads, and developing things that we'll need in the future.
Yeah, it's fun having watched the rockets and the rover before those challenges. I can tell you that there are always things that go wrong during the mission. So to watch the teams critically think through those mission sets as seemingly everything is failing is wonderful to watch.
And I think that's one of the things that I'm glad you mentioned, that critical thinking. That's such a skill set that's needed, right? To be able to adjust, to pivot, developing those skills early are really key. And so participating in activities like this, activities that other organizations that they may have in Chicago, we have here in Huntsville, like Hudson Alpha has several activities. There are a lot of different programs like yours that offer students opportunity to get hands-on opportunities to really, use their hands, use their thinking to solve problems. And so I'm excited about this program that you have in place that provides students opportunity. But NASA has several opportunities, but seek those out through your schools, through your colleges in your local area. Most colleges that have engineering or science programs, they have summer programs. And sometimes they have programs throughout the school year that you can participate in as well. And so I encourage you to go to those websites and seek out information on what they'll have available for you to participate in as well, wherever you live.
Absolutely, and I can say with the coming of social media and the internet, the world has gotten a lot smaller. You can get a lot more involved. A lot of us are working remotely, so suddenly a lot more people become accessible online, which has been wonderful to make connections. So, which is great, which leads into, obviously, you mentioned on critical thinking. I'm identifying some areas in terms of how to get more involved in terms of like online and whatnot. Any advice for the next generation? Any critical aspects that you would part with them to say, this is what I would encourage you to focus on?
Well, of course, being a chemical engineer and a biologist, I love both of those fields and aspects. I would say take as many science and math courses as you can. You can do it. I always tell people, if I can do it, you can do it. I love those courses. It took work, but I was able to do it. So I'm saying, take those courses, challenge yourself. I love the quote that they talk about, nothing worthwhile comes easy. It requires work. So I love to challenge myself, and I encourage, today's youth and teens to challenge yourself. So take those challenging courses that'll open up your eyes to other opportunities. Also, think. It's one of the things I like to tell my Sunday school classes. It's like, think before you speak, think before you act. Use those skills that you're developing, because you can't take things back. And so develop those skills of critical thinking, of communication skills. Take advantage of clubs at your school and organizations so you can develop leadership skills. Having the technical aspect is key, right, to be successful in any industry, but definitely in the aerospace industry. Being, engineer, scientist, mathematician, those are key, and having that capacity to understand the work. But we need leaders, and so we need people who have leadership skills, who can communicate the work that they've done, so that managers and our stakeholders external to the agency understands what we're doing as well. And so we need people who can speak in front of an audience, who not nervous about it, who can take this complex information and tell it so that a fifth grader can understand it, right? And so those are skills that we need as well. And so I say, challenge yourself, look for summer internships, other opportunities that are available across the country. Take advantage of those things, get a mentor, talk to somebody who's where you want to be, right? So you can understand, how do they do it? What are some advice and tips that they have for you that help get them along the way? For me, it was taking those challenging classes. It was getting an internship when I was in high school, and then continuing getting internships in college. So I sought those opportunities out so that I could be prepared and know this is what I wanted to do. And so it got me a foot in the door. And so that's really important too, getting that experience along the way. And so those are just some of the tips that I would offer the current generation, our Artemis generation. You're a part of this Artemis generation. And so the students today are going to be the astronauts for our Artemis program, and our engineers that are going to be there when we actually get back to them and get to Mars. And so it's going to be you who are going to be filling these engineering seats and these astronaut roles for us. And so we encourage you to work hard, and don't be discouraged, because there's a lot of opportunities in the engineering field. And so come on and join us. We want you to, and we would love to have you.
Absolutely. And you bring up a couple good points there. I mean, at some point, you and I are going to be on the outsiders looking in, watching on the next generation, taking us to the next challenge, which it's going to be jaw dropping. And you touched on a point of challenging yourself. And that reminded me of a quote that I had whenever I finally got into college and did this competitive program that I've been working for so long. I finally could take a breath, right? And I could finally relax. And I remember the first day my professor walked in and he said, "Congratulations, you made it into a competitive program. Now look around. You're all equal now. What is going to set you apart now? What is the next step to challenge yourself?"
That's right.
And that's really pushed me. And it's been a great advice to this date. So Dawn, thank you so much for taking the time to step us through all this. This has been absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate you giving your time on for what's us for us is 3 inches of snow. So it's a snowmageddon down here, right? So
I know, that's right.
thank you so much for taking the time, and it has been absolutely wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to students because you are not only our present, but you're our future. And so thank you for what you're doing for the community and for the youth as well. So thanks again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.